Hello, church family. It's good to see you, and I'd like to continue in our Bible study on Psalm 27. And yesterday, we defined hope as a settled confidence that God would keep His promises. And in Psalm 27, verse 1, the psalmist David said, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" And we talked about in the midst of David being on the battlefield, he still had that settled confidence that God would keep His promises. And the reason is because he had confidence in the person of the Lord. And that's what we saw in verse 1. To David, the Lord was his strength, was his salvation, was his light. But also, as we continue in looking at the confidence in the Lord provides hope, not only in the person of the Lord, but also in the performance of the Lord. Look at verses 2 and 3, where David says, "When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident." Not only do we see that David has confidence and hope because of the person of the Lord, but also in the performance of the Lord. He looks at what the Lord has done for him in the past and the enemies that the Lord has delivered him from, whether it was as a shepherd delivering him from the lion and the bear, or whether it was just as before even being part of Saul's army as a captain, fighting with Goliath. Throughout David's life, because the Lord has been faithful in the past, he knew that in the midst of his battle, in the midst of the enemies he was facing right now, that the Lord would continue to be faithful. And so it is today that we can have confidence in God. We can have hope, a settled confidence that God will keep His promises because of His past performance. Not only in our lives, but as we look to the Bible and see God's faithfulness in the past as well. He's been faithful in the past, and He'll be faithful today as well. Aren't you thankful that He is God, Malachi 3:6, and He changes not? I'm so thankful, as Hebrews 13:8 says, that Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. God has always been faithful. God has always been powerful, and so He will be faithful and He will be powerful in our lives today. We think about all the things that He's done for us in our lives. That gives us hope, settled confidence that God will keep His promises in the midst of our battles today. Not only do we see from Psalm 27 that our confidence is in the Lord's person and in His performance, but secondly, our hope comes from our commitment to the Lord. That provides hope. Look at verse 4. "One thing," David says, "have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in His temple." Not only does living with our faith in the Lord give us hope, but also living faithful to the Lord provides for us a measure of hope that we cannot have otherwise. David mentions three specific commitments in this verse. First of all, David was committed to lingering near the Lord. He wants to spend time in the Lord's presence. Now, at that time, it was through the tabernacle that David could go and worship the Lord. He says, "One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life." David wasn't just content every once in a while to be with the Lord. He wanted every day to be with the Lord. This theme is repeated in Psalm 84, verses 1 through 4, where David says these words, "How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts! My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God. Yea, the sparrow hath found an house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young, even thine altars. O Lord of hosts, my King and my God, blessed are they that dwell in thy house. They shall still be praising thee. Selah." David thinks about the birds that are able to make their nest in the tabernacle and at the altar, and he's envious of them. Why? Because David is committed to being in the presence of the Lord. He wants to linger near the Lord as much as he can. And that certainly should be our desire today. And if all of us are honest, up to this point where many of us find ourselves limiting our social reaction with others, we find ourselves with very busy schedules. And many times we found ourselves almost crowded God out with all that we had to do, but now we have more time. And I hope that that's your desire, to linger in the presence of the Lord. Now, right now, we're unable to do that at the physical location place of the church and assemble together, but there is nothing that has prevented you from spending time reading God's Word and praying to Him and seeking His face, and then encouraging others. You know, a genuine desire to be with the Lord will manifest itself in an action. Shouldn't we be committed to praying and reading the Scriptures and worshiping the Lord? What a wonderful promise. James 4:8 says that if we draw nigh to God, He will draw nigh to us. And certainly that's what brought David hope in the midst of his battlefield, and that's what can bring us hope as well, is our commitment to the Lord providing hope. Oh, may each one of us desire to linger near the Lord. Not only did David desire to linger near the Lord, or was he committed to that, but he was also committed to loving the Lord. He says in verse 4, there towards the last part of it, he says, to behold the beauty of the Lord. You know, David desired to seek His face. He wasn't just committed to being where the Lord was, but he was committed to worshiping the Lord from a heart of love. And certainly that should be our goals as well, that we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and all our mind. And we do that, as Christ says in John 4:24, God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and truth. And what a wonderful blessing that we have the Spirit of God to help take the Word of God and to show us truths that we can better know how to love the Lord and worshiping Him. David, his commitment to the Lord provided hope. He lingered. He wanted to be in the presence of the Lord. He wanted to worship the Lord by loving Him, but he was also committed to leaning upon the Lord. The last part of verse 4 says, to inquire in His temple. David desired to commune with God, to share his request with God. David was really declaring his complete dependence upon the Lord. I think of Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. And you know, the hope, the settled confidence that God will keep His promises really does come from our commitment to the Lord. And here we see a commitment to leaning upon Him, to think about the wonderful resource of power that we have of prayer. Jeremiah 33:3, call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Matthew 11:28, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You know, Christ, the Lord, has invited us to come unto Him. And what a wonderful blessing. As David wanted to lean upon the Lord, that was his commitment in the midst of the battlefield, which gave him help. So we lean upon the Lord, and to know that He has promised to hear us and answer us. In John 14, verses 13 and 14, Christ says, and whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. John 16 and verses 23 and 24, and that day ye shall ask me nothing. Verily, verily, I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall ask the Father in my name, He will give it you. Hitherto have ye asked nothing in my name. Ask, and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full. What a wonderful opportunity we have today to learn to lean upon the Lord. Instead of worry, instead of fear, instead of doubt, instead of despair and discouragement, we can lean, we can trust upon the Lord, because He's promised to give us all that we need. Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 says, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God that passeth all understanding shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. And verse 19 says, but my God shall supply all your need according to His riches and glory by Christ Jesus. What a wonderful thing that our commitment to the Lord will produce hope. lingering, spending time with Him, loving, worshiping Him, and then leaning, trusting upon Him. In the midst of your battle that you're facing today, there is hope. There's hope because we can have confidence in the person of the Lord and His performance, but we can also have hope because of our commitment to the Lord brings hope in our lives as we linger near Him, as we love Him, as we lean upon Him. We will have confidence that God will keep His promises. Instead of worry and fear, let's have hope.